Greetings from Portugal. My name is Sandra Ribeiro and I'm here to present to you a European project entitled Love, Language and More. And the title of our presentation today is Enhancing Young Male Learners' Motivation for Language Learning, which is the purpose of the project. At a time when a mass education system predominates throughout Europe, it is necessary to acknowledge that everyone is unique and thus learns differently. The purpose of the European project is to address the uniqueness of young male learners within a language learning context. This project is based on the fact that young adult foreign language learning is imbalanced between men and women, and so there is a need to increase young male learners' participation in lifelong learning society. The project, which is a transfer of innovation, considers this scenario, and the purpose is to transfer the pedagogical handbook for teachers and trainers, a toolbox with validated exercises, and also suggestions to use Second Life for oral language learning from the Czech Republic, Slovenia, and Slovakia to Portugal, among other countries. In order to do so, the first step was to develop a framework analysis to encompass several topics, namely the description of the country's education system, policies, programs, and conditions that there are to reach disadvantaged target groups and how to motivate them to learn. Then the population characterization by education level and gender, and finally language learning policies, language learning places, and languages that are being taught in each partner country. To obtain the data mentioned, the first thing that the Portuguese partners of the program did was a literature review, which focused on the analysis of official European documents with reference to Portuguese data, as well as governmental documents and statistics. Also, an analysis of the Portuguese language learning institutions was conducted via internet, telephone, and in some cases through personalized contacts. The second step was then to contact the target group, and in this case young male students, and for the purpose of this project we consider between the ages of 16 and 27. We placed in a short online questionnaire made up of 10 multiple choice questions using Lime survey, and the idea was to identify eventual problems young male students connect to language learning, as well as to understand their perceived motivational factors. Finally, and in order to better identify the problems, challenges, and difficulties felt by teachers when teaching these young male learners, we interviewed 5 different language learning experts. In-depth interviews intended to assess and differentiate the problems within the language learning class in terms of gender, and to understand how teachers cope within this classroom. Furthermore, we wanted to understand how contents and exercises are selected and understand the role of ICT in the language learning class. The Portuguese results are as follows. We were able to acknowledge that in Portugal there is no specific policy related to foreign language teaching. We were able to find general references to the importance of foreign language learning within the European context, but no specific information was found. It is worth mentioning that in higher education, in universities and polytechnic schools, there is autonomy to develop their own methodologies. Legislation gives teachers the freedom to use teaching strategies as they feel are most suitable for the students. Although it is possible that some institutions have internal policies, we were not able to find them through the desktop research carried out. So we find that there is an absence of a common policy, which translates into the fact that each school, each course can pretty much do what they want to do in terms of language teaching. The online questionnaire, composed of 10 multiple choice questions, was made available. The idea that we had that young male learners do not like language learning was clearly demystified as 358 questionnaires were validated and only 6.15% of the respondents claimed not to like or to actually hate language learning. Also, it is worth mentioning that these young male learners consider that teachers should combine different teaching styles, but mainly focus on ICT-based activities such as PC activities with internet access, for example, where 22% of the respondents focused this aspect, or, for example, virtual environments such as Second Life, social applications such as Facebook, among others. The in-depth interviews to the 5 foreign language teachers reveal that there is difference in terms of age group, meaning that older active workers who decide to learn a foreign language are mainly male, while female learners dominate the 16 to 25 age group. But in general, these teachers think that young females show more interest in class, are more attentive, more persistent, and hardworking, while young male learners are more easily distracted, or more competitive and less participative. Also, all teachers interview clearly identify specific contents where young male learners show more interest. They agree that, for example, they prefer practical situations which involve sports, work, computers, while young female learners prefer, for example, topics related to fashion and romance. Also, in terms of policies, they claim to follow guidelines defined by the government or by the coordinating teacher, and they usually work with a student's book as main reference. They all agreed that ICT, such as videos and other online resources, contribute greatly to learners' motivation and interests. When questioned whether they were open to implement our suggestions, all teachers were very interested and open to these new themes and exercises proposed by the toolbox. So we can say that while working to enhance young male learners' motivation for language learning, we can conclude that the Portuguese, or at least within the Portuguese context, that there seems to be no language learning policies. As such, professional organizations on foreign language need to collaborate with each other to establish common goals and policies in order to achieve a prominent role within educational circles. Secondly, we can say that the questionnaire analysis allowed us to conclude that the percentage of respondents that don't enjoy learning language is not as high as was initially expected. Furthermore, the constant references to ICT-based learning strategies on the learner's behalf lead us to believe that interactivity, such as using computers and electronic devices, online widgets, and so on, within the classroom motivates young male learners, as this allows them to participate and at the same time control their own learning activity. In this sense, the teacher who searches to interact with his or her student is proposing knowledge, creating problems, and suggesting routes. This makes the student drift into an active role that allows him or her to enjoy what is being taught. We conclude that it is important for young male learners to be given opportunities to express themselves within the learning environment. As to the teachers, our interview reveals that the experts rely on guidelines given by superiors and implement these in class, completely disregarding the student as a unique individuals. force teachers to look at the class as a whole and very often implement group strategies that clearly do not contemplate the scientific differences between gender, which surprisingly teachers acknowledge but in practice fail to address. The challenge is then to find ways to, within the policies and the curricula, find ways to meet the student interests and to preserve their sense of masculinity in a female dominated area. And finally, both teachers and students acknowledge that although ICT in itself is not self-determining, the way the activities are implemented tend to engage and foster greater male learner motivation and participation, as ICT is a medium with which they identify themselves, pay attention to, and in fact enjoy using. Thank you for your attention. If you'd like further information, you can look us up on the web. It's www.lovelanguageandmore.eu. Thank you.